Yo, look at this. It's March, and all of my kale is going to seed. I thought maybe the Ragged Jack was going to hold out because it usually does a little better in the warm weather, but alas, no. You know you can't eat these though. Much like a broccoli, you can eat kale sprouts. And you can still eat the leaves when they go to seed, but as they continue to flower, these get tougher and more bitter. This is actually a turnip that has gone to seed, so you can see how it was. It actually has a bunch of ants in there, but yeah, check that out. So what will happen here once a plant is going to seed, for instance this kale, it's like, looks like a normal kale plant like this where you harvest the leaves and eat them, but then it puts up a center stalk and it starts to set buds which will flower. And different brassicas have different ways of presenting their seeds, but like in the case of this turnip, it's getting these little pods here along the stem, and the seeds will actually develop in there. So interestingly, a lot of times when things go to seed, it doesn't mean the food is over. For instance, I know a lot of people have a hard time growing radishes because they so quickly bolt. That's another word for going to seed, is bolt, whenever they start to flower. Radishes do that real fast whenever it's hot, but radishes set pods like that turnip is, and when they get, before they get, the seeds get real big in those pods, so when it's kind of more like a green snap pea, imagine, it has that texture, they taste like radishes. And so for a lot of people that have a hard time growing radishes, turns out you just have an easy time growing radish seed pods. I don't have just a whole lot of brassicas planted out here because that freeze killed a lot of my stuff, but I've got a handful of rutabagas here that are not bolting yet. I noticed the other day that my cilantro is starting to bolt. That's growing a center stalk up. I had a bunch of Brussels sprouts here, started flowering, so those are cut off there. We generally will just cut things off and leave the root system in the ground as long as the plant wasn't sick, because that's going to end up just breaking down. Now, brassicas will sometimes try to start growing again. Look at that little tiny open Brussels sprout there that's sprouting out of that. Some leaves trying to grow. If it does become a problem, like it's not dying back, then we'll pull it out. But right now, in the in-between garden, which is where we are, of brassicas bolting, and it's not quite warm enough to plant out a bunch of stuff. Wow, look at that. I mean, this has all just happened in the last couple of days. These are cabbages that did this. Isn't that wild? They had not really started heading. It'll be time to take all this out. I mean, you could still eat some of this. We've been eating off of most of these kale plants all winter, so that's likely all just going to get cut out and tossed to the pigs or the chickens or both, because there's a lot of plants. And then of course you can just let them develop seeds and save seeds too if you want to do that, which is also productive. This in-between garden is hard, and I was talking about this with Will earlier, because when you live in a place like this that can get very warm very quickly, like already this spring, not even spring, before it was spring, when it was still like late winter, we've already had multiple days that were over 85 Fahrenheit, 29 Celsius. So it's pretty warm, and that's too warm for brassicas. Growing those things during this time of year is always a gamble, because we could have a lovely moderate spring and have a great brassica harvest. But in most places that you're looking at high 80 degree temperatures, high 20 Celsius degree temperatures, like March, April into May, you would do better to grow your brassicas in the fall and into the winter. Because likely if it's that warm in March, it's pretty mild in December, and it evens out. Look at my asparagus bed coming back after the freeze. Look at this. There's so many of them. You can definitely see that some of these are coming up a lot larger. But here you can see some of the plants are a little smaller. I'm just leaving them alone and letting them get established. Jackson carried this out here for me. This is my bird bath that I got for Christmas for my boys. I'm not 100% sure where I want to put it. Any suggestions? I don't know, but it really is pretty. I also have this little table and chairs, which was in my kids' garden back in Arkansas. It could use a little elbow grease, but I'm gonna put it out here somewhere. Up in the front, we had a raised bed garden when we first moved here, and Jeremiah built a pergola over it, and we knew that we would eventually kind of move out of that space, so he did not make that pergola permanent. And I actually think that we're gonna move that up here and use that pergola in one of the garden spaces to hold some shade cloth, because we don't need it there in front of the house, and I'm actually going to plant a fig tree in front of the house, a big one. Well, I cleaned up my greenhouse really well the other day, and I've already begun making a little mess out here, but that's okay, I can always pick it up again. Today I performed the very difficult task of thinning my seedlings. I hate doing this. I hate it with a passion. I really try not to have to. I try to sow my seeds in such a way that I don't really have to thin. Like I thickly sow tomatoes and then separate them, which mostly didn't waste very many seedlings. That's what Will and I were doing today. We were thinning and potting up tomatoes. As you can see, here's a bunch of tomatoes potted up. You'll be amazed at how fast these grow now that they have their own pots with fresh soil. So the way that I like to sow things to try to waste as few seeds as possible is that you have an option when you're going to sow seeds. You can either put one seed per cell or pot. Like here I have 32 pots in a tray. I could put one seed in each pot. The risk is some don't come up. So like right here in this tray I have 1, 2, 3 pots that are empty. And at this point, the rest of the seedlings are growing their first true leaves. So likely those seeds are not going to come up. And if you go that route of one seed per, and then you have some that don't come up, you either have to re-sow them and then they're behind from the other ones, or you have to just not have them. And that means that if you wanted 30 plants on the front end, you have to start 35, because what if some of them don't come up, and you can never really guess the germination. You assume that it's good if your seeds are new or saved from the last year, but it's hard to know. So what I like to do is I sow one seed in most cells, but occasionally I'll just accidentally drop 2 seeds, and instead of picking one of them back up, I'll just sow those. And so you can see some of these pots have 2 in them, but it makes up for germination. So what I can do is, with very great care, I take a seedling out of one of the pots that has 2, try to get the roots as intact as possible, which just requires being gentle and patient. You can't just go ripping on them, but if you gently tease seedlings apart, you can usually get a pretty solid root system on it. And then I just take one of the cells that didn't have it germination, and I put this seedling into it. In the case of this particular tray, I had really good germination, only 3 empty pots. Can I also clarify here? Sometimes you'll see me plant tomatoes really deeply. There's not that same benefit with peppers, because peppers aren't going to grow roots off of their stems like tomatoes will. The trick with peppers is once they have grown about this tall, you pinch the tops off to force them to brush out. But it's not time for that yet. I get asked a lot about sowing peppers deeply, and there's not a benefit to that. So with this tray, I had pretty darn good germination. I didn't have a lot of empty cells, but where I do have empty cells, I can just pluck out seedlings and plant them into the empty cell, and now I'll have none. I still have some seedlings that I'm gonna have to trim out, unfortunately, and I might wait just a tad, because this is where sometimes I have this 32 cell tray of jalapenos, and I've got several extra seedlings, and once I get all of my tomatoes separated, obviously I have plenty of space in here, as long as I have soil and pots, I may come and separate these out, and then it's just more plants that I can give away to friends. For things like jalapenos, that's not something you can usually go buy at a local store. If it were a more common pepper, like the ones I showed you earlier, those were things like Things I had either a whole lot started and I really didn't need any more, or things that were very common. I think some of those were jalapeno seeds, seedlings. Some of them were banana pepper seedlings. But like not jalapenos, I'm going to have local friends that are gardening that are going to want these. And I'll plant probably at least 10 to 12 plants of these, which is going to produce a lot. I might even, I'll probably put about 12 plants in. So I will account for about a third of this tray. And I don't know, this is just me telling you, this is something I really have a hard time with. Because to me, like plants are such a resource. Every one of these plants in my mind represents the potential of gallons of food. And so it's hard for me to just pinch it off and toss it away. That's why I try to avoid sowing a lot of extra. I know a lot of people just go in and thin them out super, like, okay, this is just part of it, but I definitely have a hard time doing that. They're looking really good. I thought they were growing super slow and not doing as well, but then I was looking the other day at a video from a couple weeks ago and they've actually grown a lot, so I just need to cool my jets and hold my horses. Everything's looking good in here. I mean, this is where I spent most of my work time today, was out in the greenhouse. So I already knew it looked good. I was just showing you. Oh, I just spotted something that I'm really happy about. This is my Baptisia. It's the, oh shoot, I just broke that, but it's a year old, so not surprising. It's the strawberry lemonade Baptisia, and it's so pretty. And I have not seen any signs of life in any of them. So seeing that poking out of the ground is very exciting to me. I've got those in these areas on either side of the benches, and I was a little nervous because they're kind of a big focal point here. My friend Matthew has the same one in his garden in Ohio. His channel is the Southerners Northern Garden. And I mean, I figure if it can make it through the winter in Ohio, it can make it through the winter here, but I still got nervous because sometimes I do. So I'm down the garden belt a little ways, and here is where we had the in-ground garden last year, which we haven't even uncovered this. And I probably won't for just at least a few more weeks until I'm absolutely certain the frost has passed and we'll get this uncovered. But this is where I'm thinking of setting up that pergola-like structure. I don't know if I guess it's a pergola. It's just not like real dense. But I'm thinking it would be a really good way to maybe put some shade cloth over this garden because we do deal with the heat, and shade cloth makes a massive difference. Like here we have the high tunnels, which actually, even though it's been cooler, we've left the shade cloth over these. These have 50% shade cloth. And take a look at this. So out there you saw all the brassicas are bolting, but in here we have lovely healthy cabbages. Now, I have started to harvest these a little bit. Some of them are on the smaller side, but like these big heads, I'm probably going to cut a few of these at a time, make some things like sauerkraut, and put some of these up because I don't want to risk them going to seed, but the shade cloth has made a massive difference for them. Same thing over here. Y'all look at this. We picked almost, 2 quarts of strawberries just a few days ago, and already we have quite a lot that are looking good. Now, I was told, which I have actually never heard this, but it makes sense, that whenever a strawberry blossom, when the middle turns black, that it's from freezing and it's not going to produce. And I think that's probably true, because like here's one that the inside had turned black and it has just shriveled up. So this last cold snap we had, this artichoke didn't really do very well with that. They're actually all a little damaged, but this is something that I'm going to cut. I was waiting to finish a carnivore challenge I was on, and I gave some artichokes to Will, but they put on quite a few more. So I'm going to cut those, steam them, serve them with some drawn butter. When Jackson was little, when I was learning to cook, I got on a cooking kick. I went and bought some artichokes at the store and cooked them, and for the longest time, he was probably like 2 or 3 at the time, for the longest time he talked about the dipping in butter things. That's what I always think of whenever I see him, the dipping in butter things. Some of these got pretty good and damaged by that last frost, so I'm not sure how good they're gonna be to eat. And I thought about these ones that looked a little damaged, just letting them go and letting them bloom. Because like this one's got, I don't know if you can see how damaged they actually are. But here though are some more brassicas. These are Brussels sprouts. And I'm just gonna wait and see if they do a little better in the shade cloth. Look at that. It's pretty good, huh? So I actually came down here to plant these. I picked these dahlia bulbs up at Costco, I think. I don't know, the big box stores often get different bulbs and plants in. They only have them for a little window there at the beginning of spring, and then they go on sale pretty quickly. So you can get a bag like this, sometimes for like $10. I think full price they're like $16. They're still pretty affordable even then. Now, this is me being a little bit of a risk taker. It is coming in now on the end of March, and our estimated last frost depends on what chart you look at, but it's usually listed between the first week of April and the third week of April. I'm kind of in a weird in-between place, and I will tell you that because we are right by our pond, my garden here is right by the pond, my pond is kind of a lowish point for the surrounding area, and I think it gets colder here than it necessarily does like at the top of the hill, which makes sense because cold air pools, and that's something to keep in mind if you're actually thinking of garden placement. Cold air pools. But my garden is where it is because I wanted it in proximity to my house, which I wanted in proximity to my pond, and I'm just dealing with that. I do not think that is going to freeze again looking at the 10-day forecast, but it very well could. I am going to go ahead and put these bulbs in the ground because they've been sitting inside now for a few weeks, and some of them are looking a little dry. But I just want to go ahead and plant them. I think that it'll be fine. Likely, if it does freeze again a couple weeks from now, these may be just popping up, but I should be able to mulch them and cover them with some plastic or some fabric and get them through a freeze. They're not going to be big. They're not going to be something that I have to really worry about. So I want to say that if you see me doing this, you don't want to do this too far ahead of your frost being guaranteed gone, and if you do, you're doing it with the risk that you might be making more work for yourself. So anyway, I'm gonna plant these like 4 or 5 inches deep. Just stick them down in the ground, cover them with soil. I'm gonna go about every like 12 to 18 inches because I'm filling these beds up planning on cutting these flowers. I've got these beds in between the high tunnels. Down the side here we have strawberries, and this high tunnel is going to be converted into cut flowers for this year, but it's going to spill over here, and I think dahlias are going to be really pretty in these beds. That's a potato. Yeah, that was definitely a potato. I don't think that was supposed to be in here. I texted Will like, hey, did you plant potatoes in here? Sometimes Will and I have whole conversations about things that we think we're gonna do, and I will completely forget. I don't think that was supposed to be planted in there, and I don't think that there's anything planted in here. I think I'm okay to put my dahlias in here. So another thing, a lot of times whenever you buy dahlias from places like Sam's Club and Costco and these big bulk bags, you get these massive clusters, and you can actually break off parts of these and plant them separately, or you can plant them all together like this and they're just going to grow really dense. So I understand why, like, the bag recommends like 20 inches apart, and if I were going to plant this whole thing together, I would definitely do that. A lot of times whenever you buy like fancy dahlias online, you'll get like one thing. that's what you'll get. So this goes to show what a great deal this actually is. I'll probably leave most of these together. If there are some that are like really dangling, I might pull them off and kind of stick them close by. My main goal here is to just fill this bed with these, and I'm going to take this bag and space it out however I need to fill this bed with these. All right, back to planting. So those are all planted. I had one left. I probably could have fit it in here, but I'm actually gonna go stick it down in my raised bed garden. And I'm gonna set this in my side-by-side and then grab a cabbage, because I was just talking to Jeremiah and he's making tacos for dinner. And he asked if we had anything crunchy. And I said, why, yes we do. We have cabbages though. So I'm gonna take a cabbage, thinly slice it. I will thinly slice some red onion in with it, and then I'll probably squeeze some, I don't know if I have any lime juice. I might have bottled lime juice, but that's not nearly as good. I do have some lemons. I'll squeeze something acidic on it, lemon, lime juice. Could also use maybe even a splash of apple cider vinegar or something like that. And then I will, you know, I might put some strawberries in it. It depends on what meat he's doing for tacos. I'll do something like sweet with the crunchy and make some sort of slaw to go on the tacos. That's the plan. I think this one right here is calling my name. I don't have a knife or anything out here, but I'll just twist it off. Okay, there it is. A lovely dinner. Something crunchy for tacos. Hey boy.
Hi.
I really need an aerial shot of my garden to make some decisions on what is gonna go where. Because I haven't nailed down where I want my trellises, so I'm not sure where to stick this dahlia. All right, I think I'm gonna go with right here on the inside of this bed next to the pavilion, because I know I'm not going to put a trellis right here. I wouldn't put a wall trellis or anything right here because it would block too much my view of the garden from the pavilion. So I'm just going to put this dahlia right here in the corner. The thing with dahlias in South Carolina is this is I don't have to dig them. I can leave them in the ground. They will continue to multiply here in the ground. So this is kind of a choice that I'm making, that this thing's going to come back here year after year. But I think I'm okay with that. I had one big dahlia in my old garden in Arkansas. It was my first dahlia that I really loved. And I loved that it came back every year and bloomed. And I think this will be really lovely right here. Ben's buddy just showed up. They're gonna go hunt for strawberries. Thank you guys for hanging out with us today. I'm gonna go help with taco night. We bless you. Until next time.